All right, let's dive right in. Today, we are looking at something really fascinating: how South Korea is basically building living infrastructure. Yeah, you heard that right. They're trying to protect their incredible mountain landscapes from, you guessed it, the growing threat of climate change. I mean, it sounds like one of those old riddles, doesn't it? How do you stop a mountain? But for engineers in South Korea, this isn't a brain teaser. It's a super urgent, very real problem. We're talking about a country with crazy seasonal rains, extreme temperatures, and the constant threat of catastrophic landslides. So, how do you keep those slopes stable? Well, for decades, the answer was basically brute force. Just throw up massive concrete walls, string up some steel nuts. Problem solved, right? Wrong. It turns out these super rigid structures are a huge pain. They're high maintenance, they're terrible for the local ecology, and, get this, they're surprisingly fragile. So researchers are tossing out the old playbook and writing a new one. This one is all about being green, being smart, and actually working with nature instead of fighting it. Okay, so to really get why this shift is so important, we have to look at the specific challenges happening on the Korean Peninsula. This is a place where those old school engineering methods, well, they're literally cracking under the pressure. You see, Korea is kind of stuck in this climatic vice grip. You've got these absolutely punishing seasonal rains that just soak the soil. Then that's followed by freezing cold winters. And this constant cycle of freezing and thawing, it acts just like a hammer on the concrete, just bam, 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 weakening it over and over, and shortening its lifespan by as much as 30%. And if that wasn't enough, the growing season is super short, only 5 or 6 months. That makes it incredibly tough for plants to get a foothold and help hold all that soil together. It really is the perfect storm for landslides. So, if concrete is failing us, what's next? Well, the first big idea is something that's been right under our feet the whole time: plants. But listen, we are not talking about just planting a few flowers here. No, this is about deploying plants as highly effective living engineers. Now, there's a name for this, of course: bioengineering. It's pretty much what it sounds like: the science of using living things, plants, roots, even tiny microbes, to build structures that hold the land together. The whole philosophy is different. Instead of just slapping a concrete wall on the side of a mountain, you actually grow a living system that becomes a part of the mountain itself. Of course, you can't just use any old plant. Researchers have put together a botanical A-team of native Korean species that are perfect for the job. You've got the Korean red pine, an absolute beast when it comes to thriving in rocky terrain. Then there's the Mongolian oak, which builds these incredibly tough root systems. And you round it out with fast-growing shrubs like Lespedeza, which do double duty. They grow fast, and they actually make the soil healthier by adding nitrogen. So what's the secret? How do these roots do their magic? Well, you can think of them as nature's rebar. It's a three-part system. First, right at the surface, you get this dense mat of shallow roots. That stops the top layer of soil from just washing away. Then you've got these deep, strong taproots that act like anchors, drilling down and locking everything into the stable rack layers way below. And finally, you have the lateral roots that spread out sideways, literally weaving all the soil particles together into one solid, stable mass. It's brilliant. Okay, so using native plants, it's a fantastic idea, right? Case closed? Well, not so fast. Here's the twist in the story. Having a genius solution doesn't mean a thing if the system you need to put it in place is a complete mess. And that is exactly the problem researchers ran into in Korea. So when they started digging into the country's actual engineering standards, what they found was chaotic. The rules were all over the place, scattered across different government agencies. Each one had its own set of guidelines. There was no single way to measure things, so you couldn't even compare how a plant-based slope performed against a concrete one. There were no rules for how long these things needed to last in Korea's crazy climate. And this is a big one: there were zero guidelines for how to combine these new living solutions with the old concrete ones. It was a bureaucratic nightmare. And check out this quote from the research. It just hits the nail on the head. It says Korean practice is transitional. Basically, that means they're stuck in the middle. They're still following these old school prescriptive rules, the kind that say you must build a wall exactly this thick. It's like following a recipe word for word. What they need to do is shift to modern performance-based standards, which focus on the end goal, like this slope has to be able to survive this much rainfall without caving in. It's about achieving a result, not just blindly following a recipe. So how in the world do you fix a system that's so fragmented and complex? The solution they came up with is actually pretty elegant and really powerful. You build a single, unified intelligence to make sense of the whole mess. And that's where AI-driven standardization comes in. The whole idea is to take all that messy, fragmented data from all the different agencies and feed it into one system. You translate it into a single unified format that a computer can actually read. Then you let an AI loose on it. The AI can analyze everything. We're talking soil type, climate data, how well certain plants perform, material costs, you name it. And it can recommend the absolute best, most optimal solution for any given slope. It's basically using tech to slice right through all that red tape and just find the smartest answer. But wait, the innovation does not stop there. This is where things get really wild. What if instead of just using plants to hold soil together, you could get nature to literally build new rock? Yeah, get ready because we're about to talk about bacteria cement. Okay, the scientific name is a total mouthful, microbial-induced calcite precipitation. Let's just call it MICP. The concept, though, is actually pretty simple. It's a process where you use the natural day-to-day life of specific bacteria to get them to produce calcium carbonate. And calcium carbonate is, well, it's basically natural cement. You can use it to bind soil together or even heal cracks in solid rock. So how do you make this nature's superglue? It's a four-step process. First, you introduce some special bacteria. A common one is Sporosarcina pasteurei into the cracks in a rock. Step 2, you give them a little snack, basically a liquid cocktail of urea and calcium. Step 3, the bacteria do their thing, they metabolize that snack, and it kicks off a chemical reaction. And finally, step 4, that reaction creates these tiny calcium carbonate crystals that start to grow and expand until they literally cement the rock back together from the inside. It's incredible. And the results, they are absolutely staggering. I mean, lab tests are showing that rock joints treated with this MICP stuff become 40 to 50% stronger. Let that sink in. A 40 to 50% boost in strength. That is a massive leap in structural integrity, and it's all done with nothing more than some bacteria and their lunch. To put that into perspective for you, that is like turning a pile of loose gravel into a block of solid concrete, and you're doing it with a totally biological, eco-friendly process. This is a complete game changer. Now, of course, no technology this revolutionary is perfect right out of the gate. There are always challenges. So before we can start deploying armies of these little bacteria to protect our roads and hillsides, researchers have to figure out a few final but really critical hurdles. It turns out the two biggest enemies of this living cement are the exact same things that wreck regular concrete: water and frost. So on one hand, really heavy rain can slowly, over time, dissolve those calcite bonds, weakening the whole structure. And on the other hand, you have the frost. In the winter, water gets into tiny fractures, it freezes, it expands, and it can literally crack the very biocement that was created to hold the rock together. So this is where the cutting-edge research is happening right now. Scientists are working on ways to kind of nudge the bacteria into creating calcite specifically because it's the most stable and water-resistant form of the crystal. They're also studying exactly how that freeze-thaw cycle causes damage so they can figure out how to stop it. And they're even looking into creating these cool hybrid solutions, like combining the bacteria with polymers to create a next-level, super durable material. And, this really brings us to the big takeaway here. The whole point of all this research isn't to find one single silver bullet solution. It's about building an entire toolbox, one that's full of smart, adaptive, and living solutions that engineers can mix and match and customize for any situation they face. When you step back and look at it all, from an AI that thinks like a master engineer to bacteria that builds like tiny stonemasons, what we're really seeing is a fundamental shift in how we think about building things. It really leaves you with a wild thought, doesn't it? Could the future of our infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, even our cities, actually be alive?